A castle you could walk right past without ever knowing it was there. This is the mystery of the sky-revealed castle, a medieval fortress built to be invisible from the ground, yet display its true form only from above. By the end of this exploration, you will understand the secret language of stone used to communicate with the heavens themselves. We will uncover why master masons buried sacred geometry into the earth and how a fortress could wield power through its very absence. What does it mean to build a monument not for the people below, but for an audience in the sky? Stone became a language long before the first foundation was ever laid. The medieval mind saw the world as a living text, a place where every mountain, river, and forest held a meaning placed there by a divine hand. The architect's first and most sacred task was to learn how to read this landscape. He walked the future building site not with a surveyor's tools, but with the eyes of a priest and an astronomer. He charted the path of the sun across the seasons, noted where the moon rose over a distant hill, and listened for the whisper of the wind through ancient oaks. This was not mere superstition. It was a profound belief that a structure built in harmony with these celestial and terrestrial forces would be imbued with a power far beyond the strength of its mortar. The land itself was the first and most crucial canvas, and the castle was meant to be a perfect sentence written upon it, a sentence only fully legible from the vantage point of the heavens. This philosophy drew directly from rediscovered classical texts and intricate religious diagrams that mapped the universe as a series of perfect geometric forms. The circle, the square, the pentagram, these were not just shapes. They were seen as the fundamental building blocks of creation, the sacred geometry that underpinned everything from a snowflake to a star system. A master mason would transcribe these perfect forms onto the imperfect earth. He might align a fortress main gate with the rising sun on the summer solstice, bathing the entrance in a symbolic light of power. Or he might shape the outer walls to form a massive, hidden pentagram, a protective symbol meant to be seen only by angels looking down. This was architecture as a form of prayer, a permanent ritual etched into the very soil. The strength of the castle was therefore twofold. Its high walls and deep moats defended against earthly armies, while its hidden geometry and celestial alignment were believed to summon a higher spiritual protection. It was a fortress designed to be unconquerable not just from the ground but from the cosmos itself. Survival demanded invisibility. While the celestial alignment promised divine favor, the first line of defense was always the earth itself. A commander knew that the most powerful castle was the one an enemy army could not find. This strategic imperative for topographical concealment turned the landscape into a living, breathing part of the fortress. A castle tucked into the crook of a misty valley, its gray stones mimicking the color of the surrounding cliffs, presented no target for a siege engine. An invading force laden with heavy armor and supply carts would stick to the open roads and valleys, completely oblivious to the garrison observing them from a hidden ridge. This was not an act of cowardice but one of brilliant, pragmatic warfare. Why waste soldiers and resources on a costly frontal assault when the terrain could do the work for you? A hidden fortress conserved its strength, allowing its defenders to choose the time and place of any engagement. For the local population, the castle's uncertain location was a powerful psychological tool. Was that distant hill just a hill, or was it the home of the local lord, from which his scouts could be watching at this very moment? This pervasive uncertainty stifled rebellion and ensured control without the need for a constant, visible military presence. The land itself became a silent ally, its natural folds and rock formations manipulated to create a perfect shield. defenders enjoyed clear lines of sight from their concealed positions, while attackers were forced into an exhausting and disorienting game of hide and seek across unfamiliar ground. In this way, the first and most formidable wall of the castle was not made of stone, but of the clever use of the earth's own disguise. This deep integration with the earth was an art form in itself, a masterful act of architectural camouflage. Builders did not simply place a castle upon the land, they wove it directly into the fabric of the wilderness. They quarried stone from the very hillsides they were fortifying, ensuring the walls over time would weather to the exact same color and texture as the surrounding cliffs. From a distance of even a few hundred paces, the fortress would dissolve into the rock face, a ghost structure. They followed the natural contours of the land with a sculptor's sensitivity. Instead of leveling a hilltop to create a flat, obvious platform, they would nestle towers and ramparts into the existing curves and folds of the terrain. A rounded keep might echo the shape of a nearby mountain peak. A low curtain wall could follow the ridgeline so perfectly that it became indistinguishable from the stone spine of the hill itself. This was not just about hiding, it was about becoming. Builders even encouraged mosses and ivy to take root on non-critical sections of the walls. This deliberate greening broke up the hard, straight lines of the masonry, making the castle look less like a man-made intrusion and more like an ancient, organic part of the landscape. It was early ecological engineering, a patient partnership with nature to create the ultimate disguise. The fortress did not shout its presence from the hilltops. It whispered, a silent and watchful guardian woven into the very ecosystem it occupied. Yet this raises a profound question. If a castle was so perfectly hidden from the people on the ground, how did it assert its authority? How could a lord project power from a fortress that was, for all intents and purposes, invisible? The answer lies not in what was seen, but in what was known. The local population lived with a constant, low hum of awareness. They knew the castle was there, even if they could not always see it. They knew the Lord's men could descend from what appeared to be an empty forest or emerge from a seemingly solid cliff face. This psychological certainty, this unseen eye, was often more effective at maintaining control than any towering, obvious citadel. The power was in the mystery, in the unsettling knowledge that the wilderness itself was watching. This celestial conversation was written in the silent language of geometry. To understand the message, we must learn to read it. The master mason did not use a simple ruler and compass. His tools were ropes, stakes, and a deep knowledge of sacred proportions passed down through generations. He would begin by establishing a central point, the axis mundi, the spiritual center of his future fortress. From this point, he would mark out perfect circles and squares, the fundamental shapes of creation. The circle, with no beginning and no end, represented the divine, the eternal, and the heavens. The square, with its four equal sides, represented the earth, the four elements, and the material world. By combining these shapes, he created a blueprint that was a map of the cosmos in miniature. A common pattern was the squaring of the circle, a geometric puzzle representing the difficult task of bringing heavenly perfection down to the imperfect earthly realm. The resulting floor plan, when viewed from the ground, might look like a series of practical courtyards and buildings, but from the vantage point of the sky, it would reveal its true nature as a perfect mandala, a cosmic diagram. The placement of every tower, the angle of every wall, was a deliberate choice. A long, straight curtain wall might be aligned to point directly at the North Star, the fixed pivot around which the heavens turned. A chapel might be positioned so that on a specific saint's day, the first ray of sunrise would illuminate the altar. These were not random architectural flourishes. They were permanent astronomical observatories and spiritual devices designed to lock the castle into the great celestial clockwork. The fortress was engineered to resonate with the harmony of the spheres, a concept that believed the planets moved in mathematical ratios that produced a kind of music of the heavens. By building with these same ratios, the castle was tuned to this cosmic song. It was a giant talisman, its geometric shape believed to attract and focus benevolent celestial energies, offering a protection that was as metaphysical as it was physical. This symbolic alignment was the ultimate source of a lord's legitimacy. A king ruling from a castle designed as a hidden cross could claim his authority came not just from his army, but from a divine blueprint. His power was literally written in the stars, a fact known to God and his angels who could see the full, glorious form that was hidden from his earthly subjects. This raises a final, haunting question. If these castles were built as messages to the heavens, who or what was truly meant to receive them? These master masons formed an intellectual elite, bound by oaths of secrecy within powerful guilds. Their knowledge was a closely guarded treasure, a lineage of practical and spiritual understanding stretching back through the great cathedral builders to the scholars of the ancient world. When a mason looked at a simple rope, he saw more than a tool for measuring. He saw a means to capture divine proportion. With a set of wooden compasses, he could replicate the very act of creation, drawing the perfect circle from which all other forms were believed to spring. The square was not just for checking right angles. It represented moral rectitude and the stable foundation of the material world. Using these simple instruments, he could inscribe a blueprint that was a mirror of the cosmos. One of the most powerful concepts they employed was the golden ratio, a specific mathematical relationship found throughout nature, from the spiral of a nautilus shell to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. This ratio, often represented by the Greek letter phi, was considered the formula for ultimate beauty and harmony. A mason might design a castle's great hall so that its length and width were in perfect golden proportion. On the ground, this would simply feel right, a space that was naturally balanced and pleasing to the human spirit. But from the sky, the entire footprint of the castle complex could reveal itself as a massive, interlocking series of golden rectangles, a geometric proof of the mason's genius and his deep understanding of universal order. These layouts were also directly inspired by the heavens. A constellation's pattern might be translated into the placement of a castle's 7 towers. The dimensions of Solomon's temple, as described in biblical texts, were another sacred template, believed to imbue any structure based upon it with a similar divine sanction. So the castle was at once a fortress, an astronomical chart, and a holy site. The ultimate purpose of this hidden perfection was profoundly spiritual. The true and flawless form of the castle, invisible to all mortals trapped on the earthly plane, was a masterpiece created for a single divine audience. It was the mason's ultimate offering, a prayer rendered in stone and geometry, affirming that even in a world of conflict and imperfection, a fragment of heaven's order could be made permanent on earth. This legacy of hidden genius demands a closer look at a specific, breathtaking example where these principles were brought to stunning life. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of the French Pyrenees, the ruins of Montségur cling to a jagged mountain spine. To a soldier trudging through the valleys below, it would have appeared as little more than a natural rock formation, a silent and indifferent part of the formidable landscape. This was its first and most brutal layer of defense, a perfect disguise born from the mountain itself. But to see Montségur from the sky is to witness its true purpose unveiled. The entire citadel is laid out in a stark, precise pentagon. This was no architectural whim or simple fortification. For the Cathar community who made their final, desperate stand within these walls, the pentagon was a profound spiritual emblem. It represented the 5 elements of their faith and served as a powerful symbol of protection and cosmic harmony. While the crusading army laid siege to the seemingly unremarkable rocks below, the Cathars looked upward, their sanctuary designed as a direct appeal to the heavens. The castle was a defiant prayer in stone, its perfect geometric form a declaration that their faith was rooted in a higher, celestial order, invisible and incomprehensible to their persecutors. Its ground-level obscurity provided the tactical means for survival, but its aerial geometry offered the spiritual reason for it. Montségur stands as a heartbreakingly poignant symbol of a lost world, where a fortress' ultimate strength was measured not just by how long it could hold out, but by the purity of the ideals it was built to protect. This intimate fusion of faith and stone was not confined to mountain peaks, however. The very same principles of hidden, sacred design were being applied with equal ingenuity in a completely different theater of war, where the flat, open landscape presented a unique and fascinating challenge. Across the border in Wales, another fortress perfected the art of deception. Dinas Bran crowns a steep, conical hill like a natural stone cap, its silhouette blending so perfectly with the skyline that an approaching army would see only a distant, indistinct shape. The climb was arduous, the view from below frustratingly vague, offering no clear sense of the fortifications waiting at the summit. This was its primary defense, a visual ambiguity that forced any attacker to gamble on an assault without knowing the true strength of the walls above. From the air, that ambiguity vanishes, revealing the castle's brilliant, logical design. Its clear motte and bailey layout unfolds, with geometrically arranged wards stepping down the hillside like terraced gardens. Each enclosed courtyard had a distinct purpose, from the inner sanctum of the keep to the outer baileys for workshops and garrison quarters, all organized with a precise military efficiency that was completely hidden from the ground. Its position was not just about elevation, it was about control, dominating key mountain passes, while its earthy, stone and turf construction made it seem a natural outgrowth of the harsh Welsh landscape. This seamless integration went beyond mere camouflage, seeping into local myth. Legends whispered that Dinas Bran was a gateway to the Celtic otherworld, a place of spirits that could appear and vanish within the swirling mists. This mystical reputation added a powerful layer of psychological concealment, making the fortress not just hard to see, but frightening to approach. Dinas Bran proves that the sky-revealed principle was a versatile tool, adapted here not for a grand religious statement but for pure, unadulterated military advantage. It demonstrates how a conventional castle form could be elevated into something far more cunning through the strategic application of hidden geometry and topographical disguise. This genius for using the environment as a cloak was not limited to stone and earth, however. What happened when master builders turned to another, more fluid element to hide their creations in plain sight? Water became the ultimate cloak for the medieval fortress. For architects seeking the perfect concealment, a lake or a marsh offered something stone alone could not, a living, shifting barrier of mist and reflection. A castle positioned on a natural island, or one created by diverting rivers to form a moat the size of a small lake, presented a unique psychological challenge to any approaching army. From the shoreline, the stronghold was a ghost. Its walls shimmered and warped in the haze rising from the water, their true height and thickness impossible to judge. Was that a formidable curtain wall or just a decorative facade? How many towers lay behind the main keep? The water itself whispered of hidden dangers, of deep, cold currents and muddy bottoms that could swallow a man and his siege equipment whole. This ambiguity was a weapon, An attacking commander, unable to properly assess the defenses, would be plagued by doubt, forced to hesitate and reconsider the entire costly endeavor. The water was not merely an obstacle, it was a deliberate source of misinformation. Yet, rise above that same lake, and the entire strategic picture snaps into perfect clarity. From the sky, the castle is no longer an isolated mystery. It is the brilliant, undeniable center of a watery web. You see how it commands the only navigable channel into the lake, or how its position on a peninsula perfectly controls two converging rivers. Its relationship to the surrounding landscape is no longer hidden. It is revealed as the master switch for regional trade and transport, a hub of power that draws its strength directly from the liquid highways it dominates. This hydrological genius required engineering that pushed the limits of medieval skill. To create these artificial islands and redirect entire watercourses, builders employed coffer dams, massive watertight enclosures built to hold back the flow while they laid foundations deep in the lakebed. They mastered the art of the sluice gate and the underground culvert, carefully regulating water levels to maintain the perfect defensive moat while preventing stagnation. The fortress did not just sit on the water, it was engineered into a dynamic partnership with it. The castle in the lake was the pinnacle of insular invisibility, a power that derived its authority from being both ever-present and perpetually out of reach, a tantalizing silhouette that dared you to cross the reflective barrier it called home. The true marvel of these hidden fortresses lay not just in their final, disguised form, but in the monumental challenge of building them in the first place. How do you construct a sprawling stone castle in a swamp without anyone noticing the scale of your ambition? The answer lies in a symphony of unspoken engineering genius. In marshy ground where solid earth was a fantasy, medieval builders drove thousands of wooden piles deep into the unstable peat and clay. These were not simple posts, but entire tree trunks, sharpened and hammered down by teams of men until they hit a solid, load-bearing stratum far below. On this submerged forest, they built a stable wooden raft, a hidden platform that would become the unseen foundation for tons of stone, a secret bedrock of their own making. Hoisting those stones to impossible locations required equal ingenuity. On a sheer cliff face, there was no room for a massive, sloping ramp. Instead, engineers employed counterweighted cranes, elegant wooden machines powered by a treadmill within. A team of men walking inside a giant wheel, much like a hamster in a cage, would provide the force to lift cut stones hundreds of feet into the air, placing them with precision on a seemingly inaccessible peak. The groans of these machines and the shouts of workers were swallowed by the remote valleys, the construction itself hidden by the very isolation that made the site defensible. Perhaps the greatest secret of all was the management of the workforce itself. An army of quarrymen, masons, and laborers was necessary, yet their very presence could betray the project. The solution was a masterpiece of logistical deception. Materials were often quarried locally to avoid long, conspicuous supply trains, with the quarry site later landscaped to appear natural. Work might be conducted in phases, with a small, initial fortification built to explain the activity, while the true, grand design was executed slowly, its full shape only becoming clear from the air as the final stones were laid. The foundation work, this intricate web of piles, drains, and cisterns, was the ultimate hidden masterpiece. It was a feat of technical prowess that would never be seen or celebrated, the silent, sturdy partner that allowed the visible grandeur above to endure for centuries, a community now poised to live in its carefully constructed veil of secrecy. Life inside the invisible fortress was a study in profound contrasts. For the lord, his family, and the garrison, the castle was both a throne and a prison. Their days were governed by the very secrecy that kept them safe. Every delivery of grain, every barrel of wine, every new recruit had to traverse a labyrinth of hidden paths known only to a trusted few. These supply runs were timed for moonless nights or cloaked in the thick fog of dawn, turning routine logistics into covert operations. A single misplaced footprint on a concealed trail could potentially betray their entire network of existence. Communication with the wider world was a tightly controlled affair. Messengers were vetted, their movements monitored, and the information they carried was often coded. This intense isolation forged a community bound by a unique and unbreakable loyalty. The garrison became a family, their identities fused with the secret they collectively guarded. They developed their own slang, their own traditions, a microculture born from shared hardship and separation. Yet this same closeness could curdle into suspicion. In a world cut off from outside news, rumors festered. A whispered conversation between two soldiers could be misinterpreted as plotting. The distant sight of a stranger on the horizon could spark days of anxious vigilance. The psychological toll was immense, a slow simmer of paranoia that the architects could never have blueprinted. The Lord wielded absolute power from his hidden perch, yet he could never walk among his people or survey his lands openly. His authority was an echo, a legend, but his life was one of extreme confinement. The castle walls, masterpieces of defensive genius, became the bars of a gilded cage. This delicate social ecosystem, so dependent on its separation, was shielded by one last brilliant line of defense, a deception that turned the castle's greatest vulnerability into its ultimate weapon. The final layer of defense was a maze of stone and shadow. Even if an enemy scout managed to pinpoint the castle's location, the most dangerous part of the journey still lay ahead. The approach was never a simple road. It was a carefully engineered gauntlet, a psychological and physical filter designed to break an army's spirit long before the first arrow was ever loosed from the walls. Master builders turned the very act of walking into a perilous trial. A path might lead invitingly into a dense forest, only to dissolve into a confusing network of deer trails that all looked exactly the same. An army would be forced to split up to search for the way, its cohesion shattered among the silent trees. Another route could force a column of soldiers onto a narrow ledge along a sheer cliff face. Here, men would have to advance in single file, their shields useless, fully exposed to rockslides or a handful of archers positioned on the heights above. Every step was a calculation under duress. The ground itself was a weapon. Builders would leave fields of loose, shifting scree, angels of jagged rock that twisted ankles and made any kind of organized advance impossible. They might channel paths through soft, boggy ground where heavy siege towers would sink and become permanently stuck. These were not natural obstacles. They were deliberately preserved or artificially enhanced to serve a single, brutal purpose: to turn the landscape into an active participant in the castle's defense. The most insidious tricks were the false paths. A wide, well-trodden track would beckon an attacking force, promising the most direct route to the fortress gates. But this path was a lie. It would lead directly into a box canyon, a natural dead end where the entire army would be trapped, with no room to maneuver, perfectly positioned for annihilation from the cliffs above. Or it would funnel them into a narrow pass where the true defenders waited, having watched the enemy's slow, predictable progress for hours. Meanwhile, the real path to the castle was often a narrow, unassuming goat track, known only to the garrison and the local shepherds. It might be hidden behind a waterfall, accessible only at low tide, or require scrambling up a seemingly impassable rock face. This labyrinth was the ultimate expression of the castle's hidden nature. Its strength was not just in its walls, but in the confusing, exhausting, and demoralizing journey required to even see them up close. A commander would arrive at the base of the walls with his men tired, lost, and rattled, their numbers already diminished by the terrain itself. The multi-layered genius of these fortresses, their celestial alignment, their perfect camouflage, and their deceptive approaches, created some of the most secure strongholds ever conceived. Yet their true legacy is not measured in sieges weathered, but in the whispers they left behind, the ghost stories and local legends that transformed these cunning military machines into something far more enduring in the human imagination. A phantom fortress needed no garrison of 1,000 men. Its true weapon was the story told about it in the flickering firelight of a peasant's hut or the anxious war council of a rival lord. This psychological warfare of the unseen was a masterstroke of medieval control. A lord could dominate a territory the size of a modern county without ever marching a single soldier across its breadth. His power was woven from rumor and fear. People spoke of a sentinel that could see all, a garrison that could materialize from the mist itself to punish disloyalty. The castle's uncertain location meant that no one could ever be sure they were not being watched. That simple, pervasive uncertainty was a more effective policing force than any squad of knights. It stifled thoughts of rebellion before they could even be whispered, because how do you plot against an enemy whose home you cannot find? The legend of the place inevitably grew, far outstripping its physical reality. A castle that might house 50 soldiers in relative comfort would be described in tavern tales as containing a ghostly legion, its walls manned by spectral archers who never missed. This reputation became a self-perpetuating shield. Why would an invading army risk a costly campaign against a fabled stronghold of unimaginable strength when easier, more visible targets were available? The mere suggestion of a hidden threat proved far more powerful than the threat itself. This deliberate blurring of myth and reality is central to their haunting appeal, turning cold military strategy into the stuff of local folklore and ghost stories. But the age of the hidden castle could not last forever. The very evolution of warfare that demanded their ingenious concealment would ultimately render their secrets obsolete. The thunder of the cannon heralded the end of the Age of Shadows. With the widespread use of gunpowder and artillery in the late medieval period, a castle's primary defense shifted from being unseen to being unconquerable by sheer force. High, thick walls, once the ultimate symbol of security, could now be systematically pounded into rubble from a distance. A fortress hidden in a valley was no safer than one perched proudly on a hilltop, as a single, well-placed cannonball could shatter the illusion of safety and the stone it was built upon. Warfare itself transformed, moving away from protracted sieges of individual strongholds and toward vast, open field battles where armies maneuvered for control of entire regions. The strategic value of a single, secret castle diminished overnight when the real power lay in controlling the roads, farms, and towns that supplied those armies. This shift was accelerated by the slow, steady centralization of state power. Ambitious kings and queens began to dismantle the networks of semi-independent local lords, consolidating authority under a single crown. The very idea of a private, secret fortress, a power base from which a noble could defy the monarch, became a threat to the state itself. Royal decrees often ordered the slighting or deliberate dismantling of these private castles, ensuring no rival could use them as a hidden launchpad for rebellion. Many more were simply abandoned, their purpose extinguished by the New World Order. Their greatest strength, their secrecy, became their curse. A prominent royal castle on a major river might be maintained and updated, but a hidden fortress known only to a few was easily forgotten. Without a constant garrison to maintain it, nature began its patient reclamation. Ivy that once served as clever camouflage grew into a strangling blanket. Roots of trees pried apart meticulously laid stones. The hidden paths, so carefully engineered, were swallowed by undergrowth, leaving no trace for future generations to follow. The silent partnership with the landscape was finally broken as the forest and the marsh moved in to claim their own. The era defined by stone and shadow had passed. Yet the story of these invisible citadels was far from over, for their greatest legacy was just beginning to stir in the human soul. The true secrets of these fortresses remained locked in the landscape for centuries, waiting for a key that did not yet exist. That key arrived not with a new generation of scholars, but with the roar of a new technology, the airplane. For the first time, historians could literally ascend to the perspective the master masons had designed for, seeing the Earth not as a confusing maze of hills and forests, but as a flat, readable map. The initial aerial surveys in the early 20th century delivered one shock after another. What appeared from the ground as a chaotic jumble of ruins revealed itself from above as a perfect pentagon. A castle thought to be haphazardly expanded over generations was suddenly understood as a single, coherent geometric plan, a massive square within a circle, executed from the very beginning. This was the birth of aerial archaeology, a discipline that turned the sky into a time machine. Researchers were not just looking at old stones, they were reading a hidden language, finally fluent in the visual grammar the builders had used. The modern eye was at last aligned with the medieval mind, completing a circle of understanding broken for over 500 years. This God's eye view did more than just confirm old theories. It spawned entirely new ones, revealing networks of hidden processional pathways and celestial alignments that were utterly invisible to anyone with their feet on the ground. Today, that perspective has expanded beyond the cockpit. Satellite imagery and drone photography allow us to peer down with even greater precision, mapping the subtlest earthworks and the faintest discolorations in the soil that mark long-vanished walls. We can now analyze these sites with multispectral sensors that see beyond human vision, detecting the ghostly imprint of foundations buried deep beneath farmers' fields. The digital age has given us the tools to not only see the builder's final intention, but to understand the very process of creation, from the first stake driven into the earth to the last stone set in place. This technological leap has transformed these enigmatic ruins from mere fortifications into open books, their most profound secrets now written in the light reflected back to the heavens. Digital eyes now strip away the centuries. Technologies like LIDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging, fire millions of laser pulses from aircraft down to the forest floor. These pulses pierce the thickest canopy, bouncing back to create a precise, three-dimensional map of the Earth itself. What was once an impenetrable green blank, it becomes a transparent window, revealing every ditch, every buried foundation stone, every subtle earthwork that human eyes have missed for generations. This is more than just seeing, it is a form of technological archaeology that lets us peel back time itself. We can digitally clear away the forest that grew after the castle was abandoned, erase the landslides that altered the slope, and witness the landscape exactly as the master mason first surveyed it. From this pristine digital canvas, we can then rebuild. Three-dimensional modeling software allows historians and artists to reconstruct the fortress stone by virtual stone, restoring crumbled towers and re-raising gates that fell long ago. We can apply textures based on archaeological evidence, painting the digital walls with the original lime wash that would have made them gleam white in the sun. This is not just an artistic exercise, it is a powerful analytical tool. With the castle fully restored in a virtual space, we can test long-held theories with stunning accuracy. How far could an archer on the northwest tower actually see? We can place a virtual archer there and calculate the sight lines, confirming or debunking historical accounts of a garrison's field of view. We can simulate the path of the sun on the summer solstice, watching as a beam of virtual light aligns with a specific window slit, proving an intentional celestial alignment. This allows us to experience the architect's ultimate vision, the grand reveal meant only for the sky, all from the comfort of our own world. We can take a virtual walk through the Great Hall, hearing the echo of our footsteps and gazing up at the wooden rafters, gaining an intimate sense of scale and space that a ruin can no longer provide. This fusion of cutting-edge science and ancient stone is fundamentally rewriting history, turning speculation into demonstrable fact. But these digital resurrections force us to confront a deeper question, one that moves beyond how these castles were built to ask why they still matter. What wisdom is encoded in these stones, waiting for us to finally understand? That medieval conversation between stone and sky never truly ended. Its core principles simply found new materials and new masters. Centuries later, architects like Frank Lloyd Wright championed an organic architecture, designing homes that grew from their sites rather than dominating them. His masterpiece, Fallingwater, is a direct philosophical descendant of the hidden castle. The house cantilevers over a waterfall, its concrete terraces echoing the natural rock ledges, its stone walls quarried from the very ground it rests upon. From the forest path, the structure reveals itself in layers, a man-made extension of the wilderness. But from the opposite bluff, the full, breathtaking intent of the design becomes clear. A harmonious composition that locks the building into the landscape as deliberately as any geometric fortress. This is the old magic reborn, the understanding that a building's true beauty and power are unlocked from a specific, considered perspective. The same impulse drives vast land art, like the sprawling spirals etched into deserts, creations that are often meaningless from the ground but transform into profound symbols when seen from an airplane window. Even the corporate world has adopted this aerial language, planting massive logos in the grasses beside headquarters, visible only to those arriving by helicopter or seen in promotional satellite photos. The medieval lord displayed his divine right through a hidden cross. The modern corporation asserts its brand identity through a hidden glyph. The strategic need for concealment has also evolved. Today's most secure data centers and military installations are often buried deep within mountains or disguised as unremarkable hills, using the earth itself as a shield against modern threats, a direct continuation of the old imperative to become one with the terrain. This enduring thread reveals a fundamental truth about design itself. The greatest structures, whether ancient or modern, are never just about the person standing inside them. They are about the dialogue the building creates with everything around it, the visible and the invisible, the earthly and the celestial. They challenge us to consider all possible viewpoints, not just our own. The silent lesson of the sky-revealed castle is one of holistic thinking, a reminder that true genius in design considers the view from the heavens as carefully as the touch of a hand on a stone wall. A fortress that could not be seen was a story waiting to be told. In the absence of hard facts, local folklore rushed in to fill the void, weaving a tapestry of myth that often proved more durable than the stone walls themselves. These were not just tales to frighten children on a dark night. They were a sophisticated form of cultural memory, a way for a community to explain the unexplainable and to impose its own order on a mysterious and powerful place. A ruin rumored to be the dancing ground of fairy folk or the nightly haunt of a headless knight was a place most sensible people would avoid. This collective superstition acted as a powerful, self-enforcing preservation order, discouraging looters from digging for non-existent treasure and preventing farmers from carting away the precut stones for their own barns. The castle's defense system, once manned by armed guards, was now patrolled by ghosts and guarded by ancient curses. This intangible shield protected the site for centuries, often keeping archaeologists from discovering the truth until they were equipped to understand it. The great challenge for historians, then, is to listen to these whispers from the past not as lies but as clues. A legend about a hidden golden chalice might be a distorted memory of the castle's chapel and its lost religious relics. A story of a spectral lady in white seen walking the walls could stem from a folk memory of a specific noblewoman who once lived there. The myth is a palimpsest, a document where the original history has been erased and written over with a more dramatic but still revealing narrative. To understand the full life of a castle, you must study both the stratigraphy of its soil and the genealogy of its ghost stories. The stones tell us how people built it, but the legends tell us how people remembered it. This fusion of tangible and intangible heritage raises a final, compelling question about our own role in this story. What happens when we, the modern audience, become the latest chapter in this ancient dialogue between the hidden and the seen? The romantic idea of a castle vanishing completely into the landscape is a powerful one, but the reality was far more nuanced. These fortresses were not invisible, they were strategically ambiguous. A keen-eyed observer might notice the faint, telltale signs of occupation. Plumes of smoke from the garrison's forges and kitchens would rise from what appeared to be an empty forest. The distant glint of sunlight on a polished helmet or a banner shifting in the wind could betray a hidden garrison. Sound carried especially well in quiet valleys, echoing the clang of a blacksmith's hammer or the nighttime challenge of a sentry. Total secrecy was an impossible ideal. The true goal was to make identification an approach so difficult and uncertain that an enemy would be discouraged from even attempting an assault. The very landscape that hid the castle also worked to amplify these small, revealing details, creating a psychological game of perception where an army could never be sure if the movement on a distant ridge was a scout or a trick of the light. This same critical eye must be applied to their geometric designs. While the sacred layouts of places like Montségur are undeniable, not every pentagon or square was a message to the heavens. Many common castle forms, like the simple square keep or concentric ring of walls, were profoundly efficient for defense and construction. Their patterns repeated because they worked, not because they held cosmic significance. Disentangling deliberate celestial intent from straightforward military pragmatism is the great challenge for modern archaeologists. The genuine genius of these builders lies in this very fusion, the ability to weave a layer of spiritual symbolism into a structure that was, first and foremost, a brutally practical machine for war. This balanced perspective, acknowledging both the mystical and the mundane, does not diminish their achievements. It grounds them in a more profound and believable reality. This architectural philosophy was not confined to a single region or culture, but blossomed in diverse forms across the medieval world, each adaptation revealing a unique conversation between the land and its people. This architectural philosophy of hidden power echoed across the world, far from the misty valleys of Europe. High on the sun-baked cliffs of the American Southwest, the ancestral pueblones built entire cities tucked into sheer rock faces. From the canyon floor, these dwellings were nearly invisible, their honeycombed structures blending perfectly with the shadowed stone. Yet from the rim above, the full, breathtaking scale of the community was revealed, a testament to a people who understood the defensive and spiritual power of elevation. Half a world away, the sprawling temple complex of Angkor Wat was deliberately enveloped by the Cambodian jungle, For centuries, its true nature was hidden from the ground, appearing as a series of isolated, magnificent ruins separated by dense vegetation. It took the perspective of an aircraft to unveil the astonishing truth that these temples were the sacred core of a vast, low-density metropolis, with canals and roads forming a geometric urban plan of staggering size, a city designed to be comprehended in its entirety only from the heavens. These global parallels are not mere coincidence. They speak to a shared human instinct to use the environment as both shield and canvas. The need for security drives the genius of concealment, whether from crusading armies or from rival clans. And the yearning to connect with something greater than ourselves finds expression in aligning our greatest structures with the cosmos, making them legible to the divine. The medieval European castle, with its hidden geometry, sits firmly within this timeless tradition. It was not an anomaly but a local expression of a universal principle, where architecture becomes a dialogue between survival and belief, between the earth we walk on and the sky we aspire to. Recognizing this shared heritage makes the achievements of the master masons feel even more profound, part of a global tapestry of ingenuity. This legacy of hidden genius, now scattered as ruins across every continent, faces a fragile future. Our responsibility is to become the new guardians of these sites, using our modern tools not just to understand them, but to ensure they survive for generations still to come, their secrets intact and their stories forever whispered on the wind. Preserving these fortresses now means confronting a paradox. To save them, we must allow people to find them, yet that very act of discovery can erode the magic that makes them worth saving in the first place. An access road carved into a pristine hillside, a sprawling visitor center parking lot, a well-trodden path worn deep by thousands of footsteps, these modern necessities can shatter the delicate illusion of isolation and secrecy that the castle's builders worked so hard to create. The atmosphere of mystery, that palpable sense of stumbling upon a forgotten secret, is a fragile resource that can be loved to death. Conservation efforts today are less about rebuilding walls and more about managing perception. This involves incredibly sensitive strategies, like implementing timed ticketing to prevent overcrowding, or designing walking routes that follow the original, concealed approach paths, forcing visitors to experience the same gradual reveal that a medieval traveler would have felt. Signage is minimal, using materials that blend with the environment, perhaps a simple stone marker with subtle engraving instead of a large, brightly colored information board. The most powerful tool in this new conservation playbook is virtual access. Detailed three-dimensional digital models and immersive online tours allow a global audience to explore every nook and cranny without ever setting foot on the vulnerable soil. This technology protects the physical site from wear and tear while still unlocking its history for everyone. The true goal is no longer just the stabilization of crumbling masonry. It is the preservation of a feeling, the safeguarding of that moment of awe when you turn a corner and the ruins first come into view, seemingly emerging from the living rock. This is the modern siege these castles face, not from armies with catapults, but from the gentle, relentless pressure of our own curiosity. Their survival hinges on a difficult balance, asking us to protect their story by sometimes choosing to admire them from a distance. So much has been revealed, yet the stones still hold their deepest secrets close. What final mysteries are we only now beginning to understand? Even with our satellites and lasers, the castles refuse to give up all their secrets. The most tantalizing questions are not about how they were built, but why they were built in such specific, hidden ways. What precise message was a lord sending by choosing a pentagon over an octagon? Was it a declaration of faith, a claim to a specific lineage, or a complex astrological petition? the archives are often silent, leaving us to decode meaning from geometry alone. The technical precision itself remains a marvel. How did a team with ropes, stakes, and sighting poles achieve alignments to celestial bodies with such stunning accuracy over uneven, mountainous terrain? It speaks to a lost world of practical knowledge, where the human eye, trained over a lifetime, could perceive subtleties that we now need machines to verify. And for every castle we have mapped from the air, how many more are still out there? A new LIDAR survey of a forgotten valley can, and often does, reveal the ghostly footprint of a fortress no written record even mentions, a place that existed only in the memory of the land itself. Each season of excavation brings new fragments to light. A unique mason's mark carved into a foundation stone can link a site to a specific guild previously unknown in that region. Analysis of pollen and soil samples from a castle's moat can reconstruct the exact diet of its garrison and the agricultural practices of the surrounding lands, painting a vivid picture of daily life inside the invisible walls. These are not just isolated facts, they are pieces of a grand, interconnected puzzle. The story of these fortresses is not a tale concluded centuries ago. It is a living narrative rewritten with every new discovery, reminding us that the past is not a static monument but a dynamic conversation. This relentless pursuit of understanding, this drive to look at a pile of old stones and see the cosmos, is what keeps the heart of history beating. Our journey through this hidden world now brings us to a final, personal reflection on what these silent sentinels can still teach us today. Their story is a testament to a unique moment in history where stone could whisper a prayer and a fortress could wield power through its absence. These castles were far more than military strongholds. They were the ultimate expression of a worldview that saw no separation between the practical and the profound. Every strategic concealment was also a spiritual act, every hidden geometric ratio a claim to divine authority. They remind us that true genius often lies not in the obvious display of strength, but in the subtle application of knowledge, turning the landscape itself into both a shield and a sacred text. The silent, watchful power they projected from their hidden perches challenges our modern assumptions about how influence is built and maintained. We connect with their builders not just through the ruins we walk among, but by learning to see the world through their eyes, to perceive the hidden patterns and potential meanings woven into the earth and sky. Their legacy endures in the quiet questions they force us to ask ourselves. What monuments are we building that can only be understood from a higher perspective? How do we use our own environment not just for shelter, but for communication with something greater than ourselves? The journey into their world may end here, but the conversation they started between the earth we stand on and the heavens we look up to continues. If this exploration of history's hidden layers resonated with you, there are always more mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Share your own thoughts on these enigmatic castles in the comments, and join us next time for another journey into